Hi, welcome to TTFT. I'm Royce Freeman. I'm sitting here with.
Tim Ritter.
The people that are aware of your work, which I'm sure there's a great deal of many, what would you be best known for?
I would say probably Truth or Dare, A Critical Madness from 1986, and then Killing Spree, which was made in 88 and released in probably 90 or 91, and then 1995's Creep, and then more recently Sharks of the Corn and the High Fear High 8 franchise.
I'm guessing that you started on something other than digital because there wasn't that in the 80s and stuff. Did you shoot it on video, on film? What did you start shooting on?
Oh man, I probably shot on about every format except 35 millimeter, motion picture film. But I've done uh, Super 8. Started out with Super 8 film, and then graduated as projects progressed and technology progressed. Ended up doing 16 millimeter, two 16 millimeter movies, Truth or Dare, Critical Madness, and Killing Spree. And then and also growing up, I used slides. I would even do slide shows and still photograph shows, and make a story visually with like slides, and then put music and narration and dialogue to that. And then of course VHS, Super VHS, 8 millimeter video, high 8 video, 3/4 inch, 1 inch video, Betacam SP, all the way through today's current 4K technology with the I guess you call them the little camera cards and USB flash drives and all that jazz. So
You hear a lot of filmmakers that are from the '70s generation that made a lot of the grindhouse movies and such. You hear a lot of them say that when they hit lightning in a bottle and they made a film that was kind of a fluke and it took develop a following, and then the people after that started to rip off the film, that they kind of ripped off the limitations and the things they did wrong as well as everything else, so that they thought like when Sean Cunningham made Friday the 13th, that he said after Friday the 13th, a lot of slasher movies kind of ripped off the minimalist look that they were doing. But then again, Friday the 13th was ripping off Halloween, you know. So, but when you started making movies, what was the what would you consider is the cream of the crop as far as in genre film? What's the film that inspired you to make films, and did it inform your style?
well, growing up, my mom always watched like Dark Shadows and then Star Trek with aliens and that kind of thing. And then a little movie called Jaws came out. And as a kid, I saw that in the theater and it just blew me away. I begged my parents to, take me to see this movie, Jaws, and also the Steven Spielberg movie on television, Duel. Those were two huge influences of just wanting to, make movies. Then, of course, later when Halloween came out a few years later, I saw it on broadcast television, and then I realized that I didn't have to emulate stuff like Star Wars and Jaws in a pool. Just you could actually just have a point of view shot, a rubber knife, and an attractive female victim, and do a really cool movie. And so that's when I kind of started, in the slasher genre area. And of course, Friday the 13th was a big influence. And one, two, I think I saw part two first, and then, but definitely the Halloween and the Friday the 13th movies. And then, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like you said earlier, behind the scenes there, a masterpiece. So, all those movies and the stuff that I was watching as a kid, and The Incredible Melting Man, Star Wars. It was just, like you said, the 70s were just an incredible time where it seemed all these very original projects were just kind of coming out of nowhere that were an extension of stuff, maybe from the 50s and 60s, but it was a generation of filmmakers that just loved the old stuff so much and took it to a new level, in that time period.
When you were listing the films like Halloween and Friday the 13th and all those films, even though you're wearing a shirt for Chainsaw, when was it that you actually saw the original film and then the sequels and stuff? When did you see those movies in the same time frame you saw Halloween and Friday the 13th, or at a later time?
I think, let's see, '81 was when Halloween was broadcast on television for the first time, and I saw that. And then once the, this was before VHS even took over. It was the early beta days, like 82, 83. And so somewhere in that time period, I ended up renting, of course. I think when the rental market first hit, it was stuff like Film Gore and all these compilation, the best of sex and violence from Charles Band and Wizard Video and all those before the actual huge releases, the full movies like Blood Feast and Texas Chainsaw Massacre finally made it out, on those big clamshell boxes or the big boxes. And it was probably about a year or two later. So I saw it, once the Pandora's box of Halloween was open. I was definitely a fan, and I was seeking out, all these movies. And I think Chainsaw 2, when I first saw the original Chainsaw Massacre, by then I was a splatter fan. I'd seen Maniac and, all these movies with the Tom Savini effects. And my first viewing of Chainsaw, I was like, wow, it's just, there's not a lot of characters. There's not a lot of special makeup effects. There's no gore in this movie. And it really, I was like, I don't see what the big to do is over this. But then gradually over the years, I watched it again and again, and then slowly absorbed that this was a masterpiece with the editing. And it's actually the prototype of the slasher movie that kind of Halloween jumped on. When you really look at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's the one that actually started the final girl and, all that good stuff. So everything is kind of related to, you got to put it in perspective of the time period, I think, of when it came out. And that was, of course, almost 10 years later, than the movies that I was seeing. But it took me a while to go back and appreciate just how good it was. I think one of the people that championed it in the 80s was, of course, Chaz Balin. And with the Deep Red magazine, and I would read those, and I would be like, I got to go back and see. And now I can't get enough of it. Just the minimalist, technique, the camera angles, the sound, the soundtrack, just the shots, the grain, the acting. All. I'm just obsessed. As a matter of fact, I just recently watched I guess the new 4K Dark Sky Texas Chainsaw, with all these new extras, and the same with Chainsaw 2 from Vinegar Syndrome. So spent probably a month watching that with every single extra on both those movies. They're both masterpieces in a different way, of course. So
I have that 4K as well, and there's an on stage conversation between William Friedkin and Toby Hooper,
mhm.
and he's like Toby, your movie's a masterpiece, and Toby's like, oh, don't, and he's like, no, it's okay if somebody else tells you your movie's a masterpiece. It's when you say your own movie's a masterpiece that it becomes, you
Right,
always let someone talk you up, but don't talk yourself up. They say that's the hype rule, you know,
right.
but. But I've noticed there's a theme with a lot of filmmakers, over the years. You have Charlie Band started Wizard Video, and then Full Moon Entertainment. You have people like William Lustig has Blue Underground, and he was working with Anchor Bay for a while. There's a lot of filmmakers that start their own labels, you know. And
That is correct.
what inspired you to to form your own label?
I guess it was the challenge, and then also to try to control the money, and just my studies in that era, how not to get ripped off. And I was very unsuccessful with that because I got ripped off over and over and over again. But yeah, it was just to try to control everything. The problem was, even then, as it is now, is things are sold in packages, whether it's videos to stores, whether you're going through Comtron back in the 80s. There's a pipeline, and they expect, three or four titles a month from a distributor. And when you're just making one movie every 3 years, it's really hard to make a dent. But my reasoning for doing it was trying to control the money and make money back, and not split it 50-50 with somebody, or worse, or get those books where they're, jacked up where their expenses are way more than you're ever going to make back. And hey, we made $1 million, but we spent 2 million on these ads all over the place, and going around the world to Cannes and all these places. And looks like you're still in the red. So it was an attempt to avoid all that, but it didn't work too well.
The filmmakers that I lived in Miami. I was born in New York, but I lived in Miami. When I first moved to Miami, there was filmmakers that I became aware of that I learned about your work and heard about you through them, like Fear Film, Robert Massetti and Jason Daly and Michael Hoffman, and those filmmakers. How aware of their work were you before some of them started putting their stuff out on your label?
Well, Michael Hoffman, we worked, Joel Weinkoop and I, when we made movies. I believe we worked with him on Dirty Cop No Donut and Screaming for Sanity. And he was kind of just like us, only a little bit younger, probably maybe 10 years. I'm not sure how much younger, but he just wanted to join the party. And he, was on the set for a few of our movies, and he loved what we were doing, and he just wanted to be a part of it. And obviously he was so inspired he went and made Scary Tales, which is kind of the next level of the Twisted Illusions, and used Joel Weinkoop in it. And it was great. When I moved up north later, I was working with Ron Bonk and SRS Cinema, and then I became the head of one of his labels, Sub Rosa Midwest. And I was looking, my ties were still in Florida, even though I was up north in Kentucky. And Robert Massetti contacted me because I guess he had heard that I made movies in Florida, and a he had a series of little shorts that he put together in a movie called Phobias. And I think he shot it on the Canon XL1 or XL2, and it just looked phenomenal. The production value, and the movies were great, the shorts were great, and we got along great. And I helped him get his first deal through, Sub Rosa Studios on Sub Rosa Midwest, and we released Phobias. So that's kind of how I was introduced to, a lot of those guys, just from my ties in Florida, or working with them, or Joel Weinkoop working with them, in Florida as well.
There was a film festival that I went to when I was living in Miami, South Florida area, and they had Scary Tales. I think was playing there. I think they showed Jason Daly's short Beware,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was also became aware of this filmmaker Richard Cecere,
Mm-hmm.
and he had done some stuff. And it's interesting. I call it the heyday, the good old days, because that's kind of where I started. But there was a certain type of vibe in a lot of that content of which was reminiscent to, like your shirt, the good old days of non-PC, take the gloves off, white knuckling it, kind of just telling stories about real people doing real things. And sometimes real things are not pretty, and sometimes they offend. But now with today's, a lot of people get everything up in a bunch, and they get offended by stuff. They try to silence those voices, and those liberties and those freedoms kind of get censored a little bit. What is your take on that as a filmmaker growing up through the times? Do you feel as whether when you started out it was one way and now it's a little different? What's your journey?
It's definitely much more difficult, I think, to get politically incorrect, or just savage commentary on things out these days, because distributors, everybody wants to stay safe and just kind of make money. And the big thing now is just kind of funny shark movies, and parodies, title exploitation, kind of, Amityville this, Amityville that, Jaws this, Shark that. That's the safe area. Um, and I did one, and I put my own spin on it with Sharks of the Corn for SRS Cinema. It was a lot of fun, and I put a lot of politically incorrect things in there, even in the humor, and people immediately called me out on it. And this was just weird commentary stuff on politics and things that were happening that really weren't even that big of a deal, I thought. But nobody seems to have a sense of humor about that anymore, and definitely. It seems the older movies that are, going through like Vinegar Syndrome or whatever label, Severin, you can release the older ones and it's okay because they're from that time period,
Oh,
and it was they didn't know better then, or but yeah, you try it now. Actually, though, I'm working on we're producing a movie kind of inspired by rape revenge movies with a filmmaker that I connected with, Susanna Kapostaci, and she's got a movie coming out that she wrote, and I helped her with the story with it. She did a movie called Night of the Zodiac, and it's going to be very politically incorrect and more in the vein of savage '70s cinema, like I Spit on Your Grave, and it's really going to go for the jugular. So we're working on that this summer. So my thing is, I just do what I do, and I really try not to factor, those things in depending on the project. Now, if a distributor's giving me money and saying, hey, this has to be commercial, we need this, this, and this, and you can do this, and you can't do that, then yeah, I mean, if they're funding it, absolutely, I have to abide by that, and I would. Now, if it's something that I'm just doing for passion, it's all bets are off. So I kind of go back and forth. For the High Eight movies and the High Eight series, we did High Eight, High Death, and High Fear, and we really tried to be, we didn't. There's really no politically correctness in any of the segments. Like my segment in the first one, Switchblade Insane, is totally inspired by House on the Edge of the Park, Last House on the Left. The second one is just kind of a real mean spirited thing on serial killers and obsessions with them. And the new one just got reviewed in the LA Times, High Fear. And my segment is kind of, it's about crazy meth dealers in the woods, kind of inspired by Deliverance and a psycho preacher that meets them. So, there's no political correctness in what I do, personally at this point.
there was a period of time where I lived in Cincinnati because I was working with some filmmakers there. And there was a guy I heard about and didn't actually meet, but I knew people that worked with him. His name is Lou Vockel, and he made a movie called Vagrant,
Hmm.
which it's a film that's inspired by the gritty '70s, down and dirty kind of things. And that was about in the late 2000s,
Hmm.
before 2010. That seemed to be a resurgence. That retro thing kind of started to become in vogue, and you started to see remakes of Last House on the Left and I Spit in Your Grave. And I've noticed that when they remade those two films specifically, they were produced by the people that made the original. So like when Wes Craven produced the remake of actually The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, he said, well, I was a first time filmmaker or second time filmmaker when I was doing those films. I didn't know what I was doing. So when he let these other auteur filmmakers do his remakes, he actually said the script and the film for those remakes are actually better than his film. Because in Last House on the Left, to break up the dire nature of what's happening with the kids, they put those bumbling cops, which kind of stupid. And even he says that he thought that the bumbling cops was, it took away from the grit of the film. So in the remake, it's all grit. Um, have there been remakes like John Carpenter's The Thing or Cronenberg's The Fly, or any remakes that you actually think are as good or better than the original?
Oh yeah, one of the scariest movies of all time, I think, for me as a kid even, was Invasion of the Body Snatchers '78, the Philip Kaufman remake. And just that one was one that gave me nightmares and terrified me. And the sound effects, the sound design, the spooky atmosphere, the film noir photography. I mean, everything about that movie, even Donald Sutherland's performance, it's just a frightening movie, and it still is. And as you watch the extras and on the Blu-rays and everything, you see how they did all those sound effects, and that was like a real baby that they got an ultrasound on and recorded that, and then did some sound effects design on it. And it's just, that movie is just so powerful. But yeah, definitely The Fly, The Thing. It's hard to even see those as remakes, because as a kid, those were probably I saw those first, and I was like,
Yeah.
even though I was reading in Fangoria and Famous Monsters that these movies are remakes, you know, they took such a new spin on the original stories and made them their own that it they're, they still go hand in hand. But and I enjoyed I thought the I Spit on Your Grave remake was really, really brutal. The hook scene with the fish hooks in the guy's eye, and the ending with the shotgun, and I mean,
Yeah.
incredible movie. And I enjoyed the Last House movie, although I do like the original the best. That one's one of my most favorite. Also, when I saw Last House on the Left on VHS for the first time when it was released by Vestron, the next day I was getting ready to fly out and pitch Truth or Dare Critical Madness to some investors in Chicago. So it was an exciting time, and seeing that movie, it's just so inspiring because they did it in Sean Cunningham and Wes Craven's backyard and the state
Yeah.
park, and people running around the woods. I mean, it's just something that I knew that I could attain and still do, with very little money. So it's a movie that I always look to for inspiration. And I even saluted the silly cop scenes in Truth or Dare Critical Madness. We have bumbling cops in that, and I wrote a bunch of scenes that kind of cross cut with the really brutal happenings, like the baby getting hit by the killer in the stroller, and the little leaguer being chainsawed by the maniac in a drive-by chainsaw assault. And I had the bumbling cops kind of thing. So even though I know I've read the stories on Craven saying that he just wanted to do that to lessen the tension and not make it be so brutal for the audience, and I still think it kind of works because it is kind of funny and it does give you a breather. And maybe being too intense too long is not a good thing. You've got to give
Yeah.
with horror, especially these days in the Scream movies and everything, you've got to give that roller coaster ride. So if you're watching a movie where it's just 90 minutes of an excruciating assault and then revenge, and you've got to have some kind of entertainment and breathing, and breathing space for the audience, and maybe a little bit of sick humor or laughter. And these two cops are just like perfect for it. They're like going, "You idiot, we ran out of gas," and he's laying on the road. And you're going, "Oh, I hear Chuck. Oh, it's got to be the Ada Washington with her
Yeah.
chickens."
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I see both points of view, wanting to be straight on, and then also giving the audience a breather. I guess it's just personal preference of the movie makers, and again, like you said, where somebody is in that time. It's like am I? I know Craven always asks himself, "Am I going too far with this?" And then of course there are stories of projectionists clipping up scenes and that whole thing with Last House on the Left when it got released, and very interesting.
It's funny that you mentioned Last House and then the Chainsaw and those kind of films. The the distribution moguls, Bryanston Pictures and the mob run, or whatever companies were shady, and they're like, "Oh, we'll release this movie since it's got boobies and it's got blood, and all that kind of stuff." But the marketing for those movies, like the marketing for Last House on the Left, keep repeating to avoid fainting. It's only a movie. It's only a movie. It's like a carnival barker kind of thing. It's all the show. It's a circus. Um, a lot of marketing is what you remember about the movie. The Friday 13th trailer had Don LaFontaine with his bass tones, and it was just 1, 2, 3, and it was counting down to 13 deaths. Is that how? Do you remember the marketing or the poster or something about not just the movie itself, but how it's presented in marketing? Do you remember that about the movies that you grew up watching fondly?
Oh yeah, the poster, the TV ads of like Phantasm, and right up to the point where the ball almost hits the guy in the head and it cuts. I remember that trailer really well. But yeah, I mean, with all my favorite horror movies, the movie novel tie-ins were a big thing. The poster art was just huge. It's just, if were if it was up in the theater and you saw the poster of like Halloween or Halloween 2, you would just stare. And there was no selfies. You couldn't take pictures of it with your phone or whatever. It was just like you had, and of course the vinyl records. I was too young to see Maniac when it came out, of course. So I had the vinyl soundtrack album first, and I read about it in Fangoria. I saw pictures of it. As I read the articles, I was listening to Jay Chataway's score and imagining how it all came together. And when I would finally be able to see it, and of course, it was a couple years later before I was able to see it when it was released on beta and VHS, and it completely delivered. It was just an excite. It was just one of those ones that delivered on all levels. So absolutely, and that's what the tie-in is now these days with my generation, and maybe one or two, one up and one below, is the people who collect this stuff, and these elaborate box sets on Blu-ray with the lobby trading cards and the soundtrack, Severin and Vinegar Syndrome, put all these extra goodies in there, knowing, probably because a lot of the people that work for those companies grew up the same way as a few generations now that are your main niche market purchasers of that material. And yeah, I mean, the Jaws poster is just ingrained in my mind. As a kid, I would go through the newspapers and cut out the ads and put them in a like a photo album, just obsessive on every level, between soundtracks, model kits, you know, TV showings, all that stuff, newspaper articles, reviews, anything where I could just stare. And that's why I think, the physical media part of it, which people who didn't grow up with that, with which just people who just say, "Oh, I push a button and I stream it, and it's good, I enjoy it, and that's it." I don't think they understand just how kind of addicting that whole process was and still is to a lot of us. I'll still do the same thing when, like when Dawn of the Day was re-released, last year. I would stare at the poster and I can't wait till that comes. And Jaws, I saw that in the theater with the new 3D release last year. And again, it was, wow, look at the poster. I can't wait till this comes out. And, I'd be listening to the soundtrack in my car on the way to work every day, before the movie came out. So it's just like this obsessive compulsive disorder that cannot be changed.
So you got a lot of filmmakers that have a unique style, like Carpenter likes his anamorphic and certain lenses. Kubrick would like to shoot things, in a wide format with a lot of low angles, a lot of studied feel. What is, if you had to describe your style? Is it eclectic? Like each movie is a different feel, or is there a certain style that this movie you like to shoot a lot of coverage, a lot of things in masters with very sparse coverage? What is your style?
Well, it kind of depends on the project, but I tended early in the early days, I would pretty much keep the camera pretty locked down, and then there'd also be homage to Last House on the Left with kind of the handheld, but not shaky handheld, but just to give it that kind of urgency, like you are there type of feel. So I kind of mix those two, and I still think I kind of do that. And of course, when you're starting out as a movie maker, you're imitating everything that you love,
Yeah.
and all of that comes into play, and you try it and you try different things and you see what works, and then later on, as you get to a place where you kind of do more original work, where you're not emulating what you love as much, but you still are, then those styles kind of follow you, and you kind of pick what you want. Like I did a movie called Dirty Cop No Donut, and that was in like 1998, and that's kind of where I was deviated off into doing stuff that wasn't just a homage to my favorite stuff and kind of repetitive. This was more uh, like a kind of a Bad Lieutenant meets Dirty Harry, but shot like Cop. So I had all these ideas I was trying to integrate in there, but it was more original than anything I had done, where it wasn't influenced directly by Friday the 13th or Texas Chainsaw or all those kind of movies. So at that point, I just kind of figured I would shoot what was necessary for the way we were presenting it, and that was all kind of like Cop. So I kind of go back and forth from semi documentary to just complete camera nailed down to the tripod type shots, which I like too.
You got some filmmakers are actually composers and directors. So you have, you know, Carpenter did his own score, and I know part of the Chainsaw score was Wayne Bell, and it was also Toby Hooper doing
Mm.
it. And you find out that the way that he was able to do some of the avant-garde music in that movie, like the screeching sound of the camera and other sounds, was like sawing a like with sawing something with teeth onto some stringed instrument, and it created some kind of very outside the box, non-traditional music. So it was sound design. It wasn't something you could hum. And you have
Right.
other musicians like the synth stuff. You have Tangerine Dream, you have Goblin, you have Carpenter. What kind of film music influenced the kind of music you like to put in your films?
Oh, definitely. Well, when I did Killing Spree, I sat down with the composer and I gave him all my favorite soundtracks: Creep Show, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dawn of the Dead, Halloween. The list goes on and on and on. And he kind of took all those and made like a grand salute, grand slam homage to all my favorite cues in that. So Killing Spree was kind of like that. And for each movie, I really try, of course, the Halloween influence. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I haven't gone that route yet, but since I've, reviewed that movie so many times now and watch it so much, I would like to do, something in that style where it's just more ambience and just weirdness than a score. And I actually finally scored my own first movie because, of course, I'm a big fan of John Carpenter and all the guys that do it themselves. Sharks of the Corn, I actually sat down and it took me about a month and I figured out on an iPhone how to use the whatever the iPhone program is there, and it's got a pretty cool little score that homages Jaws and a lot of my favorite cues. I would just listen to them, and I would think, all right, what can I find on this that's similar, and then it would just become its own thing. So I had a blast. That was one of my favorite parts of doing Sharks of the Corn was actually composing the music for it. And then I'm doing it on other movies too, and just kind of experimenting with the sounds of the older synthesizers, the Italian movies, like you said, Goblin, all the fan favorites, and then the obscure stuff, the more like Cannibal Holocaust and just all those the Emmanuel movies. That Joe D'Amato did, those kind of things. Just all that kind of stuff. The Pieces soundtrack, the name more kind of obscure, weird stuff that I like. Maniac, Jay Chataway. I mean, man, what a great score. Manhunter, the Michael Mann movies. There's just so many really cool scores. And with the really cool thing about today's technologies are, with like the programs you can get, if you can get around and figure out how to get those sounds, you can really do a lot yourself. So it's really amazing.
When you started shooting on the earlier formats, because you had certain like 8 millimeter and stuff was more like Academy. It was more like a 4:3 kind of framing, and then over time, the aspect ratio widened up depending on the format. I've heard some directors say that, like Tommy Lee Wallace, who did Halloween 3 and he did It with Tim Curry. He said when you're shooting in 235, you can put lots of different people, but then when you have to shoot in a television format, everything's a box. So if you want a group shot, they have to stand farther away from the camera. Do you prefer wide angle lenses? Do you prefer shooting in a full matte television type format where things are like a face is a close up, or do you like a wider frame where you have to kind of fill out the shot with other things and it's not you can't just get a close up?
Again, depending on the project, but of course, I grew up on television, the 4:3 black and white snowy picture,
Yeah.
so I was real comfortable with the Super 8, and they kind of had that 4:3 look. And I think on the box set release that SRS just did of my shot on video years, there's some Super 8 movies in there, and they're 4:3. and projected on the screen, it was always, growing up, it was just a television. And then, the course of the movie theater, I didn't realize at the time that, so much was cut off. When you watch a movie like Dirty Harry on television, you're like thinking you've seen it. And then later when Laserdisc, released these movies and you saw that there were other things. So now, when I shoot, if I do something on HD widescreen, I do like to, expand that and put, you know, kind of paint the picture a little bit and put different things in different places so people can see it. And I kind of wasn't able to start doing that until about 2012 with Deadly Dares, Truth or Dare Part 4. So it took me a long time to get, to the widescreen format. But so up until that time, I was kind of just satisfied with the 4x3. And then as the technology changed, and then the opportunity to use that wider frame, and I do like wider shots myself. And then of course close-ups are always good for television because if you go too far. But now everybody's got big TVs, so the problem used to be the wide shots didn't translate as well, in 4x3 small televisions. But then, of course, now everybody watches their phones, so you've got a 2-inch screen now. So it kind of worked both ways. I know David Lynch is just angered by that. Anybody watching movies on their phone on this tiny little screen. So there's so many choices now. So many choices. I mean, again, I like to do both.
Do you find that you're, I guess, the auteur filmmaker where the less people on set, the better, and you could just make sure it's your vision? Or do you like doling out responsibility to other people and letting other people bring some new flavor to the party?
Again, I think the smaller projects where you do more, where you shoot, you're like I'm running the camera, and there's just a few people who know you well that are really good friends. That's fun, and it's just like-minded fans that are having a blast together, and that can be some of the best times. And when you get money people, investors,
Yeah.
even Indiegogo, where the fans have input, which is great, but still you're kind of pressured to do more what folks want you to do as opposed what the material might be calling. So both ways. I've done all, but I think the best experiences are definitely the smaller crew where you're doing everything. How about you? Since you've done a lot of movies, you like the financed way better, or just kind of the fans getting together and just going for it?
My journey is that my first film that I got to direct was because a friend of mine who he and I have been trying to write scripts for years, just on our own for fun. We kept writing them with the idea of this could be a cool Hollywood movie. So we put effects in these things, and we kept trying to see if we could, do it the Hollywood way. And it wasn't doing anything for us. And my friend came into some money because of an inheritance, and he decided, we're gonna make our own mark. So I got to direct a movie and co-write it with a friend of mine, Kurt, guy named Tom, that is a friend of mine. He's the producer, financer, and we got to make our first film. And after that, I did a series of short films, and then I got to make another feature movie. That one was done like you feed people lunch, and they do it for points. And then if the movie makes some money, they make the money with you, and if it doesn't, then it's a nice calling card. I haven't had the financier quote unquote route yet. It's all been kind of passion projects. So the struggle is finding people who believe in your wacky vision, who want to spend a couple of weekends at a time shooting this thing, for lunch. But my dad actually is a filmmaker, and I got into it because of him. And he was shooting on 35 millimeter and 16 and stuff when I was a kid. And he actually he's retired. He works on all my projects now. So I get someone who's giving me the Hollywood experience in the post-production side. So he gets to edit most of my stuff and do the post-production work. And that's great. Do you have people in your close circle of friends or actual family that work on your projects too?
Yeah, definitely. I had in Florida, and then also up here in Kentucky. Yeah, I do have a group of people like Larry Treadway of Brains on Film. He's like an Emmy award winning editor now, and he edited Sharks of the Corn. And sometimes I'll edit it myself, depending on the project and how much time. As you know, I mean, it's so time consuming to make a movie and do every aspect of it, especially a feature, even a short. You know, if you're really putting all into it, it can be, you know, a 6 month journey
Oh
to,
yeah.
to do that. So yeah, I mean, I have people here, like that are, real close friends, and that's great that you have your dad involved with it, and that he worked in Hollywood. You said so.
Well, we lived in New York, and he was raised in the South. He went to Vietnam and was a photographer when he got out of Vietnam. And he worked with this magician in New Jersey named James Randi. He he was a magician, but he also would debunk people who actually said they did real magic and real illusions. He could debunk almost anybody's trick because he knew all the
Oh,
tricks. Uh, so my dad actually traveled with him and did road work. My dad got to meet Alice Cooper. My dad got to meet Deborah Harry and a plethora of other celebrities. And what's interesting is, he came from shooting on film, and then he started in the video world in the 80s and stuff. And when we're doing all the stuff now, it's all on HD and digital and stuff. And he said that it's like learning to drive a stick shift. He goes, I worked on film before I got to do video. And once you have the discipline of working on film, you can, you already know the technique. You can do anything. If you drive a stick shift, you can drive a regular automatic car.
right.
If you're a good driver. I mean, it doesn't mean you can do it. But um, I learned a certain discipline that over the years I've slowly learned. I'm a slow learn. You ask anybody, but the quality's there. I put my heart into it and I slowly craft things, so I'm not as fast. But what's the discipline for you different on shooting on film versus shooting on video? Is it always, if you're shooting on film, you have less of it, so you have to plan your shots and you can't get as many of them?
Right. I mean, yeah, the old shooting ratio. Oh, yeah, for like Killing Spree, it was like 3 to 1, 4 to 1. But then even when I was shooting on video, like for Dirty Cop, now Killing Spree was 16 millimeters, so yeah, like you said, film was expensive. So, I mean, if nothing goes wrong, you try to get in a few takes and then move on. Now, Dirty Cop No Donut it was kind of reality again, a spoof on cops, which probably wouldn't go over well today.
No, no.
With the way everybody is with police officers, either pro or con, but. And that one was like one take a lot of times, maybe two if something, went wrong. But I tried to, I later figured out that I had the same, and I'm not bragging or anything. It's just over the years, I probably like all movie makers, you study other films and other filmmakers, and you read interviews with people like Clint Eastwood and Wes Craven, who are, I deem as really, mentorish type directors. And I was like, well, I was always surprised to read that their techniques and their shooting ratios were very similar to what I had found. Like Clint Eastwood will be like, if the first take is good, he'll be like, move on. And then even the director of photography will be like, well, shouldn't we get a safety? And he's like, yeah, if that was good, we're moving on. Print it, go. And it was just like, so it's just kind of interesting. I try to, you can look at it two ways. Some actors get better with more practice, or you do it in rehearsals, and some get worse the more you do it. And then of course there's effects, which may, or you have no control over the special effects. You
Yeah.
might have to shoot 100 times for that, 100 takes. But it depends again on the circumstances, the actors, and what they need and what they're comfortable with,
Yeah.
and what you're doing. But I try to do as few as possible to keep it spontaneous and fresh. If they nailed it, you just move on.
There's a couple of tricks that I've learned, but you've been doing it longer than me. So tell me your take on this, or if you've already heard this, elaborate. If you shoot a lot of times, and for a lot of these projects, you edit in 1080, but I've been shooting in 4K. I never edited in 4K, but what that allows you to do is if you know you want a close up, well, kind of frame it a little wider than you want the close up to be. And in editing, you have a medium shot, and you can punch in and you can create a close up out of it. And if you're editing in 1080, no one's going to notice you punched in because it's already twice the quality. Do you ever shoot in a higher format to allow yourself the ability to get extra coverage in editing?
We did somewhat in Sharks of the Corn. That was the first time that I, used that technique. Because, like I said, I've kind of slowly, I was transitioning into HD and then slowly into 4K. And then Brad Sykes and Tony Masiello I hooked up with them on a shot on video site on Facebook, and I think we were talking about the VHS movies. So I just kind of randomly said, "Hey, it'd be funny if we did one called, High Eight, kind of a pint-sized version of, the VHS movies." And it took off, and we actually did it. And so then we had, everybody was asking, "Hey, we're going to shoot this in high eight," and I was like, "Well, it's only been about a year or two since I've actually shot in that." So I ended up going back to that format. But it all just depends on, what the project calls for, really. I mean, one of my favorite movies also is like Natural Born Killers. The way Oliver Stone took almost every format, 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, beta, newsreel footage. I mean, and just made this incredible, movie with all this, all these formats just all mixed up, and it's just a really cool experience. But and I did that on Creep to a degree. That was kind of my little salute to that, and Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. But it just depends on the project. And one other technique that I sometimes do and have done in the past, and this is something that you might do as well, when your actors are rehearsing the scene, when you're practicing, and you're setting up the camera, I will sneak shots, reaction shots, or shots of them. They don't know I'm filming, but there's like a lot of good, you know, takes there and good expressions and good acting, and especially if it's an actor that's not, as seasoned behind the camera, or in front of the camera a lot, you'll get some really good shots when they're unaware that you're actually shooting. So that's another technique for, just getting some, good emotional stuff or reactions to someone, or for your story. So that's another little thing. But yeah, what you're doing, what you're talking about is definitely, you can do that with 4K and especially 4K and up, and nobody, and it just makes the shoot go quicker because you get more without having to do all those close-ups and relight or whatever it takes.
Do you ever do filmmaking on the go for like festivals or contests? They have a thing nationally called the 48-hour film project, and you get your assignment on a Friday, and you have to shoot over the course of from Friday at 7, and you have to turn in your finished product in hand, turn it in 7 p.m. Sunday. And it's a thing they've been doing for like almost 20 years,
Hmm.
on a national level, now world level. Do you think that doing something on a time crunch just to see if you can would bring out the best in you, or would you find it too limiting, and it wouldn't necessarily work on a time crunch for you?
I've never done one that fast as far as, a 48-hour type thing, but I've done a lot of commercial work, industrial videos,
Yeah.
weddings, all that kind of stuff. I started out on all that, and there's always been, deadlines, and like even Sharks of the Corn. I was doing another movie, and that I mean, it was there was a deadline. They were SR Cinema was, making the artwork and getting the Blu-rays ready, and they needed the file to put the movie on there at a certain point. So, we had a hard deadline for that, and it was a really it was a challenge to, meet that. I mean, it's good and it's bad because, as an artist and a movie maker that you want to put your best into it. And sometimes it's just, trying to get those shots and it takes time and you're never satisfied. So when you have a deadline, you've got to run gun, get it, make decisions. And, even in editing, there are so many options now with, uh, color correcting and, the way you can edit something, add to it. You can put stock footage. I mean, you can play with it
Yeah.
forever. But if you've got a deadline, so it really cuts out that indecisiveness, and maybe that and that can be good and bad. It can feel rushed, and you can feel that you didn't do your best work, or you can feel that you might feel that hey, I was under the gun, and I did this, and it works, and we, delivered on time. So there's kind of two, I've done it both ways many times. So, there's pros and cons to both of it.
What kind of advice would you give to up and coming filmmakers or people that have been doing it a little bit of time but still have a long way to go in their journey? What's something that you wish somebody told you when you were starting out that now you easily could share that advice and pass it on?
I think, well, my big thing has always been, just start, doing it. If you have a passion for it, doesn't matter what format, even if you have a VHS camera, find like-minded people, or there's several routes to making movies. You can go to the film schools or the colleges, and the biggest bonus those have are you meet like-minded people. Say you're in an area where there's not a lot of people with similar interests, or social media. Of course, you can connect with people that want to do the same thing you do, or want to contribute, or can contribute and want to act or do special effects or that kind of thing. But my thing has always been just do it. And now there's just so many ways to get seen. I mean, you're unlike the old days. The old days was, I would shoot on Super 8 film and then develop it, cut it physically, sync a soundtrack to it with cassette player, because I didn't even have sound on those. Try to play those, and then I had another cassette player with the dialogue, and it would never matched up. But then I would have to go around my neighborhood with flyers and try to get neighbors to pay a quarter to come and see the movie. Hey, we'll make popcorn. But now you have ways to put your movie up on Vimeo, on YouTube, on social media platforms, to at least be seen. And of course, it is hard to get noticed. You can put a lot of effort into something and put it on a site and only get like 100 views in a year, but still you got it up there and you're moving forward. And from there, there's always success stories of somebody like Eli Roth seeing a Fox trailer that you make, and then you get a budget of like $2 million. I think there was a clown movie that was successful where they actually just made a trailer and it said Eli Roth was the director, and he wasn't, but the whole movie ended up getting financed. So I think, as always, you never know when you're doing this stuff where it's going to lead or what's going to work. So it's probably always the most important thing to do is to actually be doing it. In other words, don't just talk about doing it, but go out there and actually whatever gear you have, whatever you have access to, whether it's a high 8 camera or a digital camera, do the best you can, and get out there and get your product seen. So
Well, I mean, they say you miss 100% of the chances that you don't take. So, what's the
right,
worst thing? What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you try and you don't succeed? No, no, no is not the worst thing in the world that someone can say. If somebody doesn't like your work, then keep trying. I mean,
right, right.
would you say that your work you're a trendsetter, or do you kind of keep up with the times, or you like to look back and kind of your films kind of are more niche, and they kind of are retro?
Well, I mean, each was made, whenever it was made, and I haven't tried to really, you know, because I saw the movies kind of as they, my favorite movies I saw as they either came out in theaters or on videotape. I was in that moment, and I would salute them with each project, and I've just kind of gone there. But now I kind of try to mix everything. I try to mix everything that I like and try to put new twists on it. So it's just hard for me to I don't deliberately do a retro movie, but it might come out that way just because that's the kind of stuff that really influenced me the most, especially everything in the 60s and 70s and early 80s were still seem to me to be the most creative period of original movies that from Easy Rider to Last House on the Left to Maniac and Halloween, and and all these all the different genres, The Exorcist, even the Hollywood movies. We're still copying all those movies and sequelizing them and franchising them, 30, 40 years later now. It's like we're kind of stuck. So is it really retro, or are we just kind of like repeating ourselves to try to make money?
So I want to leave the audience with this thought, because you run your own distribution company, or you're part of Sub Rosa. The people that watch this interview that are filmmakers and they have their project, something they've done, they think that they would like to show it. Um, what advice would you give to them as far as if somebody reached out and they wanted to show you their work? What is it that Sub Rosa is looking for? What's something that, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you guys see that's redundant, and you're like, nah, this is going to be it's going to disappear in the market of a million other things. So, what is a fresh thing that you guys don't get enough of that you're looking for, that one thing?
Well, I mean, I think distributors again, they like, of course, you can't really. It's really hard to go out and make like a romantic comedy, that sort of thing. So I'm assuming we're talking about pretty much horror, exploitation, science fiction,
No.
this kind of slant. So monsters, Godzilla type stuff. I mean, they're looking for pretty much anything that's fresh, but title exploitation is really a safe bet. Where you can think of something that again, it's like that the shark thing. It already has kind of a hook, like Sharknado,
Yeah.
all those kind of things. But if you can think of something that you're also passionate about that hasn't been done, Donald Farmer is a good example. He's a friend of mine, and he's been doing movies as long as I have, if not longer. He came up with the title Shark Exorcist. So Shark Exorcist. He took the word shark and he made a movie about it. Wild Eye Pictures picked it up, and he thought of the idea, and he went out and made the movie, and it was very successful. Even Stephen King has acknowledged the movie. So it really just depends on you and your passion. Can you mix it with what is very popular today and also put your own stamp on it? So, and then he does I think one of his trying to think he's doing a remake of Cannibal Hookers, I think, or he did part two. And again, he's always done kind of the cannibal hookers. He'll take, like in the 70s, there was like vampire hookers or whatever.
Yeah.
Put another word on it, cannibal. So again, it's just, I think a lot of it is getting a really cool title and creating a buzz around it, and then having the movie actually deliver what that title, when you think Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we're going, all the way back to like 72, but what I think it was originally called Leatherface, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or something else. So, and then Head Cheese originally, even before that.
Yeah.
So, whoever came up, I think it was one of the people involved with the movie, but they're
The Bryanston Pictures people, they said that we want to call it the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then they did the trailer and the poster, and it says, who will survive and what will become of them, the log line, and it had that
Mm,
had that splash art, that old school
right.
poster with the girl on the hook. There's a lot of film distribution companies that were marketing, geniuses that knew how to push the product, and make it the circus. Come here,
Right.
come over to the tent, and I'll show you a show. You,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a bit of circus. I mean, even though
Yeah.
the old Hollywood folks were kind of sleazy and there was a lot of stuff they did that was in bad taste as far as how they conducted themselves. They were all about the show because
Right.
a lot of them came from the circus or from vaudeville or stuff like that. So it was all about the presentation and the hook. How do you get them in the tent to see this Grand Guignol?
That's right. I mean, and it goes back to, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What a title back in, the 70s there. That title grabbed people and they had a great trailer. And then the movie and delivered, even though there was a lot of things you didn't see in the movie, the mind filled in the blanks when
Oh
you
yeah,
watched it. Most people swear they've seen, all that stuff. And again, I think Last House on the Left had several titles like Krug and Company,
yeah,
sex crime of the century, but it was Last House on the Left with that ad campaign that keep repeating it's only a movie that really. And again, you've got to kind of emulate that today
yeah.
with, an example again was the distributor came to me, Ron Bonk, said, hey, I got a title, Sharks of the Corn. And what I'm thinking is we've got the crazy shark concept that everybody loves, and it's kind of a riff on Children of the Corn. So right away, you've got kind of a name brand, instant name brand recognition where you're going to find some kind of niche audience, and hopefully, your trailer spotlights what that title is, and you go from there. And again, you can either create it yourself, or if you've got work that has been successful, you can go to a distributor and say, hey, I've done this movie. I can do something for you. Do you have anything in mind, that you need done? And you might get a deal that way too.
There's a lot of people that it's the gateway into the films. Like when I was a teenager, Elvira on TV, USA Up All Night with Rhonda Shear and Gilmore Godfrey, or Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs. These were people that they were the dealer for the drug that was the movie, and the teenager like myself and other people that were friends of mine, we would watch those movies because that that was what was on TV. I mean, it was heavily censored, but it was still, you had the interspersals in between the film and the introduction, and they would say, "Now you're gonna watch a movie like this," and then Joe Bob Briggs would do his shtick with the Rhonda with whoever the male girl was, and there was that stuff. And that was the way that I got introduced to a lot of those films. Did you have any similar experience in the 90s and 80s with those television hosts?
Oh, absolutely. I think Film Gore was hosted by Cameron Mitchell and Elvira, and The Best of Sex and Violence. I think that had Elvira in it, and then of course, there was Rhonda Shears Up All Night that
Yeah,
did the USA movies, which a lot of the Vinegar Syndrome releases now are these titles that were run in the '90s there. So definitely, and there's also tons of homegrown people who are still doing it on like Me TV and all these channels where they run the old Universal movies and they cut in. So there's that's still a really cool thing. So it's still open for discovery for people that just have television and maybe don't have Blu-ray and all that kind of stuff. So it's still out, all the formats are still out there from the 50s on up.
of all your projects, I know I'm a parent. I have one child. I mean, I have a stepchild too, but it's hard to pick your favorite of your children, your babies. But is there a they say you never forget your first. Is the first the love of the true love, the original love, or is there a project that's since the first that actually is your favorite?
I think Probably two of my favorites are Wicked Games, which was Truth or Dare Part 2, and that was because it was the first time that I shot everything myself, for the entire movie, and there was just a deeper connection in getting what I wanted without having to talk to, a director of photography. I was like, finally, like, I'd shot before, but most of my movies, I would have a cameraman, and that's where I was like, well, I love, being able to just translate what I'm seeing in my head directly and not have to tell anybody. I'm just, I've got the camera, I got to set it up, I know the lighting. So that movie really, really was an exciting time for me, being the cameraman and the director. And then another movie I did called Reconciled, and probably that was 2003 or so. It just really worked, and it was just really a fast shoot. We got hung up in the post production with the virtual effects, but the shoot really was fun. It was fast. It was running. Everything came out good. Everybody was on the same page, and we had all kinds of shortcuts when we ran into a problem. We were like, it was Larry Treadway and myself and Ron Blair, and we all had been doing all this enough that we knew how to get around the problem and solve it really fast and still have it really come out pretty cool. So probably those two movies were my favorite: Wicked Games and Reconcile right now.
So, can the viewers check out those titles and order them through? How can they check out your body of work?
Amazon.com has most of my DVDs and Blu-rays on there, and then also the store at SRS Cinema. Like for instance, this year, just this summer, I have from SRS Cinema. We've got the Tim Ritter shot on video years box set. It's got Dirty Cop 1 and 2, Creep, Twisted Illusions 1 and 2 on it, and some other movies, and just tons of extras. Now, also on the Vinegar Syndrome site through Terror Vision, we've had Killing Spree. That's still available. I think they're like $10 on there. And also, just coming up, we've got High Fear, the third entry in the High 8 series. That's all. These are out now or just coming out in the next few weeks. So kind of a big summer with a lot of material coming out. You can get all those on Amazon, SRS Cinema, or wildeye.com.
And how can the fans find you online if they want to see your work and then they want to give a shout out and tell you how much they enjoyed it?
I'm on Facebook, Movie Maker Tim Ritter. I got Twitter, Instagram. Probably just Google any of those on a website, www.timritter.com. That comes right up. So, any of those places, people reach out to me all the time, and we talk, and if they like the movies, or if they don't like the movies, they let me know for sure.
Well, I want everybody to thank Tim for joining us this evening. It was a pleasure. Do check out his work. It is cutting edge, and he keeps up with trends, and he pushes the envelope in a lot of areas. But his work speaks for itself. I mean, you can tell it's a passion for him, and he does it not for the money, but for the love of it. And well, the money doesn't hurt either. So,
Right.
support local, support indie cinema, and follow this man and check out his work. You won't be disappointed. I would say that, just to quote Andy Kaufman, uh, love it or hate it, but you won't be bored.
Correct. And thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate everything, and appreciate anybody and everybody who, you know, is supportive of the indie stuff, and also those who are inspired by it and hopefully have a really cool, creative journey ahead of them. That's what it's all about. I think all of us, as horror, exploitation, whatever area you love, it's part of it is just, it's not enough to watch the movies anymore, and listen to the commentaries and the making of. There comes a point where you've just got to kind of experience it and join the party. Now, not everybody has that, but but a lot of us do. You get to that point where you're like going, I want to do something just like, whatever, Last House on the Left or whatever it may be. And, you end up, you can't transport back to the sets in that era and be a fly on the wall. So you have to kind of create your own version of it. And some of them, I don't know if you'd want to be on the set of the Texas Chainsaw
No,
Massacre for a lot of that.
no, no. 100 and something degrees in Texas heat.
Right, with all the rotting flesh
The
and
lights, and according to what I read, Gunnar Hansen couldn't change his wardrobe because of
yeah,
the
yeah,
laundry. So he's kind of
yeah,
ripe, like
exactly.
like that.
Yeah,
But that is the journey of the indie filmmaker. When you're doing it run and gun and under those crazy conditions, it's like being in the trenches in a war. A metaphor. But you're going through it together with a bunch of people that sharing the passion, and it's a lot of times a miserable experience because of the conditions. But when you look back on the work, all people see is the finished work, and hopefully the longer time you distance yourself from the making of it, you don't remember as much of the misery.
right. Definitely. Yeah, and something else we didn't really touch on is the whole convention scene, and that's another recommendation that I would do to people. If you make your movie and you get a table at a convention and you've got a great poster and a great DVD with really cool artwork, there's a way you can meet thousands of fans and build a cult following. And I think one of the newest and best examples of that, and again we didn't touch on this, is Terrifier movies, and how that came from nowhere, came from Indiegogo on a little $30,000 budget. And now we've gone into part two, and they ended up putting it in theaters, kind of like the old school days, even though it was, I guess, digitally projected and through satellite. But because the cost was so cheap, they have created, and they made $10 million off it. Now,
Yeah.
Damien Leone now is, has met with Sam Raimi, and he's doing part three and getting big budgets. So it just shows that if you can get, a fan base starting at conventions and getting something like Art the Clown and little shorts that build up to bigger projects, that it can happen on a grassroots, kind of Evil Dead way, even now. And that's phenomenal. I mean, it's like winning the lottery, but it can happen.
You have to play to win, though.
Yes, you've got to do those shorts and create those characters that you pepper in your stuff, and then hope that there's like a breakthrough somewhere where it catches on. And Art the Clown to me is just amazing, the way that is caught on. And I mean, when I saw part two in the theater, at the theater there was no poster, and
Yep.
this blew my mind, because I was like, there's no poster. I'm jonesing because we talked earlier about how that is such a connection. There was not even a name of the movie in the lobby of the theater that you were going into. It just said, like, auditorium number 8. But inside the theater, everybody there, it was packed, and everybody had on Art the Clown shirts from the
Yep.
original Terrifier. And I was like, oh, wow, how did this word of mouth on social media happen to this degree? So it was really an exciting, thing to experience now. So, hopefully in the future, all of us, upcoming people and seasoned veterans that have been trying this for years, get some sort of opportunity, similar to that. But seeing that is still possible is really an awesome thing, I think.
Well, it is an inspiration to hear your journey and your story, and clearly, you know, your stuff had a groundswell, and it developed a following because here you are now. So
Right, right.
I want to have everybody check out Tim Ritter's stuff, and like he said, you can find it on Vinegar and Syndrome. You can find it on Amazon.com, and was SRS the website.
I think it's the S. Just go to Google and type in SRS Cinema Store, and it comes right up then.
Okay. Well, Well, thank you so much for your time, sir, and we will be following what you have in store for the future.
Thank you very much, and good luck to your upcoming movies as well.
Thank you. This has been TTFT, and this is Royce Freeman signing off.